I'm going to do one more sort of explanation and demonstration about some of these techniques that we've taken from practice now into application. My landscape is dry now, which is awesome. But I did a bunch of different colors in through here, and you probably saw that as I was demonstrating in the last video. I got it wet first. I brought some like blues through here. I made it heavier across here and here. And then I brought, excuse me, some greens through this area, progressed into some neutrals here because I don't want to have to use black if I can avoid it. In fact, I haven't used any black thus far. I'm gonna try to avoid it. We'll see what happens. I thought I saw some reds and some violets in this area, so I went ahead and just dropped that. Now I did exaggerate it, and that's what's cool about being an artist, I think. You get to exaggerate things like this. I'm gonna come to this in just a minute, talk about like modeling these clouds, getting this this boat in here, and some of the landscape elements. But before I do that, I want to come back to my space painting, intergalactic planetary. And so it's dry mostly. You know, my wax resist held on pretty well. And once I get it all cleaned up, you're gonna see some nice bright whites in there. But I wanna go ahead and talk about like application when it comes to making these shapes look spherical. All these projects have something in common in that they are good for brush control, and they're good for using color to shade, not just to add color to stuff. A lot of times kids, what they'll do is they'll go, oh, okay, I like red a lot, so I just want to make that all red. But we can see in things like landscapes that, or you know, with this landscape rather, there's a lot of different intensities of blue that are happening in here. It's not all the same blue. Getting kids to understand that color can be a thing that you can shade, build up, that kind of thing. Very important when it comes to building some painting skills. So that's kind of why I designed these projects as I did. Some of them I did borrow and modified as such, but a lot of them are my design. All right, let's get into this thing. A couple of different ways I can go about doing this. I think I want this whole thing to be my emphasis down here. So that means I want to lay down probably a color behind this first, so that then I can wait for that to dry and I can drop a shadow behind it. I think what I'm gonna try on that one is just kind of a light gradation of, let me think here. Since this is pretty bright, I'm guessing this might, you know, I don't know, perhaps reflect some light or something like that. Kind of have that same thing going on here where it's like brighter here and darker here. Perhaps I should maybe make it lighter here, darker on this side. So making that decision now, I'm just gonna go forth. I'm trying to avoid that planet that's in front of it, because if I keep it dry, then my paint won't go into that area. I'm gonna avoid that one as well. Again, it's all about the sheen that you see on the outside as you're working with watercolor. It takes practice. Oh, it's getting pretty. It'll work. I'm gonna start first with, I think, some yellows around the outside. I just want to keep this area fairly light for now. I think I'm gonna try to progress for some neutrals. And so to do that, I want to get a good base layer of yellow and then have it sort of dissipate as it gets further over. So the yellow is not quite as intense, which means I probably need to get it a lot more intense back here. So that would be a darker side of the planet. It's pulling a little bit of that red. I'm cool with that. It's fine. Probably not going to see that in the end. As I get over here, I'm going to add just a little bit more water to my mix so that it thins out. I'm going to try to pull some of the pigment I already have on here over there. Now I'm being really careful. You can see the paper's getting really, really delicate on this side. It's starting to crumble. And so I'm going to be super careful about that area. To get this to go kind of neutral, I'm thinking kind of like a brownish, almost kind of warm brownish. I think I'm going to throw some oranges on top of that, maybe just a streak. II. I don't know, some like geographic descriptions or something on the land. I don't know what's happening, but whatever, we're cool with it. Get something going on over there. All that good. I think what I'm gonna do at this point is get some super thinned out violet. You can see I'm using this as a canvas over here because this is super heavy. A lot of pigment in here. I don't want much pigment. I just want a small, tiny amount. I just want to let it bleed into the side. And at first it looks muddy. It's going to look muddy. It should look muddy. I'm just doing this to shade a little bit. Again, remember, we're trying to avoid black, so using violet to shade is a great way with printmaking, painting, colored pencil drawings, to avoid using black, which does, after all, have a tendency to muddy up your color. I'm just gonna make that a little more rich with some reds right on the edge and just kind of warm up some of that violet. Being real careful. I can see that my paper's starting to ball up just a little bit. Just kind of draw through there, so make it interesting. Call it good, leave it alone. All right, I think I'll try something over here. I'm gonna do opaque this time. Since I did kind of a wash on this side, I'm really not doing that right now. Let's do a big, let's do something just, maybe I'll regret it. We'll see. Do a big nasty drop of orange over there. We'll see what happens, I don't know. Whatever. If I hate it, I'll throw it away. I think I like that better. Okay, cool. So instead of going with the wash on this one up here, I'm gonna go ahead and try to go with more opaque paints where I can blend. I have maybe a little bit more control as such. Sorry, I'm just getting a little bit obsessive about this area over here. Okay, I'm digging that. Okay, call it good, leave it alone, please. All right, so that means that no water. And I want to make sure that my paints are nice and viscous, the right viscosity for this. So if I've got a good green planet here, I've got kind of a brownish, orangey, yellowy planet here. Yeah. I think I'm gonna go with like drop some blue in there. Blue's fun to blend with. Whoops. Just want to get a thick stripe of blue throughout, and then right down there in the bottom. I'm just gonna let that dry for a bit. Now I'm gonna take like a ridiculous amount of yellow. Really, really powerful yellow. Like super thick yellow. And try to get that to drag through a little bit. In some areas I'm going to blend, others I'm going to let it do its thing, I think. Alright, good. There's that little... Sometimes you can draw through this, get some of that yellow to come through the blue and vice versa. Call that one good. I think I'm gonna let this one go off to the side and dry for a bit. Back to the landscape. Okay. So with some of that modeling, guess I didn't really show like how to model things all the way out, and I intend to do that for sure. But before I do that, I'm gonna let that dry a bit. I'm gonna come back to my landscape. Now, obviously, my clouds don't look the same. They're not going to. It's just not gonna be a thing. But you're gonna get as close as you can and articulate as much as you can. What I did was I took that salt and I scrubbed as much off as I could, which is pretty much all of it. I scrubbed it off with my fingers, just like got it off of there because I don't want any more salt up in there. And now that I'm left with this, I can go ahead and start like dropping in some blues behind this. It's gonna help like set off from this white area. So I'm going to mix up kind of like a dark blue. Dark blue up in there. I'm gonna throw just a touch of brown, not much at all. Just enough to deepen it. See what I got there? It's kind of dark, yeah. Like, kind of greenish almost. Kind of dig it. Okay, so looking up in here, I'm just gonna follow the cloud line that I have. And I'm gonna get as close as I can to what I see. And then once I do, you know, every so often, I'm gonna fill that space with that same value. If I see something that I have in there that's really beautiful like this, I think that's gorgeous, honestly. I might blend that in, you know. Take a little bit of artistic license when it comes to this stuff. Trust your eye, trust your gut. You can see I'm starting to run out a little bit, coming back for more. Okay, that looks like it should be probably a little darker, and then it looks like it billows back out. We have another sort of big billowing happening here. And it looks like there's some secondary cloud things happening back here. I'm just gonna deepen that. See, this is again where I would take that artistic license and be like, okay, well, I'm not gonna fret over that one spot. That one spot is not gonna make or break this painting, right? Okay, so you can see it's starting to come together at this point. Let's see, I'm gonna kind of find this spot. Looks like it's kind of roughly in the middle. What I kind of gestured earlier, looks like I was seeing that quite well. I do want to leave a good deal of white up in there because we have some nice bright clouds up in there. Get more of that paint that I mixed up earlier. Kind of a steel blue, almost a Prussian blue color that you would see in a cyanotype or something. And we have like a nice little rugged little buddy thingy coming out here. Highlight him. Yeah, I'm digging that. Okay, let's go ahead and fill that spot. Okay, so as I'm coming down, I'm gonna start looking at like other opportunities to come in here and shade just a little bit. I have some pencil marks in here that sort of designate this area where it's really bright versus a spot that I could start breaking up and making darker. And I'll most likely just use full strength blue for that. But in the meantime, I'm gonna go ahead and continue off this cloud line, finish that up. Once I work my way down, I'm gonna start building this area on the very bottom of the clouds. I'm gonna get all of this stuff kind of worked out. I like to work my way down a landscape. It seems to work the best for me. With my colors that I've already mixed up, I think I'm good to go. I'm gonna kick this off to the side, demonstrate one more thing, and call it good. It occurs to me that this demonstration, for many of you, may be quite disheveled, as I've done it in several different stages. And one of the reasons for that is because I'm working on several paintings, And I have to wait for all this like drying time, right? I have to do things in a specific and certain order. When I talk about things like back to front, I talk about things like blocking in and getting the necessary areas laid down first. It's important to think about, because if I had tried to paint this out with this still wet, it would have just bled all over the place. And right now, you know, I've been able to mostly control it to the space that I want. So the last thing I'm going to demonstrate here is a technique I'm going to use a lot in the gumball project, which you'll see the result of once I'm completed. And that is essentially just opaque modeling with a very basic, you know, light source from a single direction, whether it's from the front, top, side, whatever, okay? So I'm starting with just my yellow in this one spot, okay? And what's gonna happen is some of the red that I've accidentally gotten into these areas is, you know, it's gonna activate. So I'm gonna get some orange. It's gonna happen, it's all right. And of course, ideally, I'd want this to be like wet enough, like acrylic paint, where it would have that same kind of consistency. And I think it's probably wet enough for me to go ahead and model with. But I'm gonna go ahead and use some red now. So I like to go through the primary colors, but you wouldn't necessarily have to, right? You could use analogous colors, you know, you could use like a yellow, green, blue. You know, you could use like red, violet, blue. Any of those would work well for modeling. And if you feel like you absolutely have to model with some black or some violet in the end, you can do that. So you can see that, like, as I lay this down, it has that really painterly characteristic that most people think of when they think of paintings, that smooth blended feel. And that's really what I'm kind of trying to establish here. Trying to get a good smooth transition from one color to the next. And then what I do after I've laid that color down is I clean my brush out, and then I just kind of go in there and feather it really smoothly with a clean brush. It's kind of like using a blender when you're drawing, if that's something that you've ever done. And I just try to keep my highlight just generally in the middle, right? So then my next step is going to be to take either a smaller brush or the very tip of my blue with this brush here, and I just want to add just a little bit to the outside edge to help us bring this whole image home. Now, again, if you don't like the blue, because it does get a little muddy with that yellow and that red underneath, it's going to go almost kind of greenish, brownish. In fact, if these were like highest quality pigments ever, you know, they're really amazing pigments, they would be pretty close to black. I'm actually going to get a little more red in there. It's one of the things I like to illustrate with the whole, one of the things I like to illustrate with the colored pencil project we normally do before this assignment, but it's been a wacky semester, ladies and gents. So, like, you can see that as I'm pulling that around, it's pulling a little bit of blue in there. If I don't like that, I can blend it back out. See, it's got a lot more dimension than some of the other ones, right? In fact, I think I'm going to go back in there with some yellow and just try to dominate that green back out. Get it to blend more with the orange and make that the more dominant color. And if you don't like, you know, how not soft it is, you know, what you can do is you can go back in there and you can add water to it. Blend it just a touch. All right. So next video is I'm going to show you everything that I've done. Good luck. I hope this works out for you. Most of all, I hope you have fun with it.